When I was around 17 years old, my buddy and I decided to go camping at a place called Shadow Lake Campground. Even now, I still get chills thinking about what happened during that trip. Right when we arrived, something felt off. It was like invisible eyes were locked on us, watching our every move. Deep gashes clawed across the picnic tables and nearby trees, as if some wild animal or something worse had torn through the area in a frenzy. I brushed it off and helped my friend pitch his tent, trying to focus on getting settled instead of the strange markings. That evening, we finally got comfortable around the fire. But as the night grew darker, I remembered the claw marks and mentioned them to my friend. He chuckled at first, clearly thinking I was just imagining things. But then we heard it, a piercing screech echoing from deep in the forest. It didn't sound human or animal. It was like something being dragged into a nightmare. We froze, clutching each other as if our lives depended on it. After what felt like forever, we finally mustered enough courage to step out of the tent. Armed with pocket knives and cheap flashlights our parents had insisted we pack, we crept into the woods, following the direction of the sound. I'm not sure what we thought our little knives would do, but in that moment, they made us feel braver. We had only walked about 50 or 60 feet when another shriek ripped through the silence. This time, it was much closer, maybe 15 feet away. My heart felt like it was going to explode. My friend's hand was shaking so badly that he accidentally dropped his knife, and we couldn't find it in the dark. Branches cracked ahead of us, and a low, rustling noise surrounded us. Before we could react, our flashlights caught something or someone in the beam. Standing there was a tall, impossibly thin figure. Its skin was pale, smeared with blood, and its sharp, needle-like teeth gleamed in the light. Worst of all were its eyes. Two small, glowing yellow orbs staring straight into our souls. The creature lunged toward us, and we bolted. We tore through the underbrush, branches scratching at our faces and arms, not daring to look back. When we finally stumbled out of the tree line, we sprinted to my friend's old truck. Of course, in perfect horror movie fashion, the engine sputtered and refused to start. Those few seconds felt like hours. But finally, the truck roared to life, and we sped away from the campground. As we pulled onto the main road, I couldn't stop myself from glancing back at the treeline. There, just barely illuminated by the truck's brake lights, were those same glowing yellow eyes watching us disappear into the night. I still don't have an explanation for what we saw. It was tall, skeletal, and completely inhuman. If anyone else has experienced something similar, I'd love to hear your story. Maybe together we can figure out what that thing really was. The summer of 2010 wasn't the best time to finish college. After spending 4 years earning my degree, I graduated only to realize the job market was nearly non-existent. As discouraged as I was about my future prospects, I found solace in backcountry camping and hiking. Growing up near the Cascades and attending college in Eastern Washington, I was no stranger to outdoor adventures. But that summer it became more than just a hobby. It was an escape. Daily hikes and sleeping under the stars became a form of therapy while I tried to figure out my purpose in life. It was late June, but the weather felt more like early spring. The days were chilly, barely reaching 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and the nights were bitterly cold, often dipping below freezing. Despite the unpleasant forecast, I had planned a multi-day hike across Ridge Peak and down to Mirror Lake. Frost Lake, my starting point, was actually an alpine reservoir. Reaching it required a sturdy four-wheel drive truck and a willingness to navigate steep, muddy trails that twisted through dense pine forests. The drive up was slick and nerve-wracking, but I managed to reach the north side of the lake without too much trouble. After setting up my tent, I decided to try my luck at fishing. The experience was miserable. The cold wind bit through my clothes, and the fish weren't biting at all. Still, There was something peaceful about sitting by the water, lost in my thoughts while the steady drizzle of rain created a soothing white noise. As I sat on the shore, staring at the water, I heard a low rumble echoing up the canyon. It sounded distant, like the growl of an engine, but there were no roads or construction sites past the lake. I briefly considered it might be an airplane, but the sound wasn't moving closer or further away. It stayed constant, hanging in the background like an ominous hum. After about 20 minutes, the sound faded away, leaving only the rain and my wandering thoughts. Eventually, I caught a decent-sized trout, cleaned it, and returned to my camp. The fish cooked up nicely, but I'll admit I've never been fond of trout. It tastes earthy to me, but I forced down as much as I could and tossed the leftovers into the lake. Nightfall came quickly in the mountains. The heavy clouds blocked any hint of starlight, and the forest became pitch black. I sat by the fire, sipping whiskey and listening to the rain drum against my tent. Before heading to bed, I gathered an armful of firewood from the pile. As I stepped away from the warmth of the fire, I noticed the rumble again. This time it was louder, closer. Frustrated and a little buzzed, I shouted into the darkness, "Hey, knock it off!" The rumbling stopped instantly. So did the rain. My stomach turned. That wasn't normal. Felt like a response. Like something out there had heard me and chosen to react. Whatever it was, it didn't feel friendly. I tossed all the wood onto the fire, creating a blaze bright enough to push back the oppressive darkness, and retreated into my tent. I sat there, heart racing, straining to hear anything over the crackle of the fire and the sound of my own rapid breathing. I felt exposed, like countless unseen eyes were fixed on me just beyond the edge of the firelight. Eventually, the rain started again. Not a drizzle, but a torrential downpour. The weight of the water pressed against the thin fabric of my tent. For a brief moment, I considered bolting to my truck and driving away, but the road was slick and I'd had too much whiskey. Driving on that muddy trail would be a death sentence. But the tent wasn't safe either. Grabbing my essentials, I unzipped the tent and sprinted to my truck. Rain soaked me to the bone in seconds, and I was shivering by the time I climbed into the driver's seat. Locking the doors and cranking the heater, I tried to calm myself down. Outside, the fire still blazed, illuminating the campsite through sheets of rain. I glanced at the truck's clock, 10:06 p.m. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, the rain had stopped. The fire was reduced to glowing embers, and a pale dawn light was creeping over the eastern horizon. The clock now read 5:45 a.m. Nearly 8 hours had passed in what felt like a blink. My head pounded with an intense hangover, though I was sure I hadn't drunk enough to warrant it. Stepping out of the truck, I surveyed the aftermath. My tent was crushed, its poles snapped like twigs. Everything was drenched and muddy. There would be no hike to Mirror Lake today. I packed up as quickly as I could, tossing my soaked gear into the truck bed. Just as I climbed back into the cab, I heard it again, the rumble, faint but clear, drifting through the thinning fog. I didn't stick around to find out more. I threw the truck into gear and barreled down the muddy trail, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. I haven't been back to Frost Lake since, and I don't think I ever will. We were supposed to be going on a camping trip. To set the stage, I was 18 years old at the time, deep in my rebellious phase. I was sneaking around, dating guys my parents would never approve of, and making reckless choices that could have ended badly. I had started seeing this guy, and of course I thought he was the one. We were from a small town in the Midwest, and one night we decided to drive out to a scenic overlook to camp. His family was incredibly wealthy. He lived in an enormous estate, and his father was a well-known attorney. At the time, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. But soon enough, the manipulation, narcissism, and abuse crept in. I tried to leave him several times, but he always found a way to pull me back. The final time I tried to end things, he threatened my family. Up until that point, he had never met my parents or even been to my house. I was extremely private about who I brought into my family circle. But this time was different. He sent me my address and listed my parents' full names. At 18, I was naive and utterly terrified. He demanded that I come to his family's lake house. So, I lied to my parents, told them I was heading to a friend's cabin for the weekend, and drove 6 hours to meet him. My family meant everything to me, and I felt like I had no choice but to protect them. When I arrived, things went sideways immediately. Over the next 36 hours, I endured horrific abuse. My hands were tied, and I was forced to sleep in my own vomit and urine. He cut me. Small slices along my arms, stomach, and thighs. By the end of it, I was convinced I wouldn't make it out alive. My parents believed I was safe with a friend and her family, and they had no reason to suspect otherwise. The guy was completely unhinged. He was injecting drugs into his veins and snorting cocaine off my open wounds, laughing like it was some sick joke. I had no emotion left. Tears streamed down my face, but I felt empty. The final act of his twisted game was playing Russian roulette. He loaded a single bullet into a revolver, spun the chamber, and pressed the barrel against my mouth. I stared into his eyes, completely devoid of fear, and told him to pull the trigger. I even bit down on the barrel. When the gun clicked on an empty chamber, he froze. For the first time, reality seemed to hit him. He broke down, crying, and eventually untied me. He sobbed in my lap for hours, apologizing over and over. I didn't care. I didn't care if I made it out alive or not at that point. I was numb. I know people might ask, "Did you go to the police? Did you tell anyone?" But no, I didn't. Not right away. I couldn't bear the thought of my parents finding out what had happened. The pain it would cause them felt worse than the trauma I had endured. Plus, his father was a powerful lawyer. I felt like I didn't stand a chance. I drove home as if nothing had happened. I looked terrible, like I had been in a severe accident. Thankfully, it was winter, and I was able to hide the scars and bruises under long sleeves, jeans, and layers of makeup. I told everyone, including my parents and best friend, that I had flipped an ATV. It was a believable story because it had happened before. That wasn't the end of it, though. I cut off all contact with him, blocked his number, and removed him from every social platform. We didn't attend the same school, but he continued trying to reach me through fake accounts. Eventually, he got arrested for drug-related charges. It wasn't just marijuana. It had to be something more serious because he ended up serving time. Of course, his father managed to get him out early. He was later sent to a rehab facility, but he escaped, and there was a brief manhunt for him. Now, I'm 24. I'm married, living in a different state, and trying to move forward. But what happened during those supposed camping trip days still haunts me. The trauma left scars that are more than skin deep. I'm on medication to manage my anxiety and triggers. My body stays in constant survival mode. I don't allow myself to get too full when I eat, just in case I need to move quickly. I lift weights daily despite being small and slender. It feels like preparation for some unknown danger. These random habits, these survival instincts, they're always with me, and I don't think they'll ever fully go away. It was back in 2001 when this happened. An old buddy of mine invited me to go camping with him. I hadn't been on a camping trip since I was around 13, so I eagerly agreed. The idea sounded great, and I was excited the entire week leading up to it. I barely slept the night before because I was so pumped. He showed up to pick me up just after 5:30 a.m., and we drove roughly 90 miles to the state forest. I managed to get some sleep on the ride, which helped me feel a little more rested when we arrived. That's when he hit me with the surprise. We still had to hike another 2 hours to reach our campsite. I tried convincing him to pick a closer spot, but he was adamant that this one was worth it. With a sigh, I followed him. The first 30 minutes weren't too bad since most of the trail was downhill. But as time dragged on, I started to feel the strain. About halfway there, we took a short break, but before I knew it, we were back on the trail. The second half was mostly uphill, and I was starting to lag behind. My focus slipped, and I stopped paying close attention to where I was stepping. We reached a flat section of the trail, and I felt relieved. My friend was walking ahead of me and somehow missed the hazard, but I wasn't so lucky. 1 second I was walking, and the next I was crashing down into a hole. Hitting the bottom jolted me wide awake, and the surge of adrenaline dulled most of the immediate pain. When I tried to stand up, my right ankle gave out and I fell again, this time landing hard on a sharp stick sticking out of the ground. Apparently, there were more spikes at the bottom of the pit, but they had been knocked over, which was incredibly fortunate. Looking down, I realized with horror that the stick had pierced my leg, and I could see bone poking through my shin. Instinct took over and I yanked the stick out. The intense pain nearly made me pass out. I leaned back, trying to collect myself, and looked upward. All I could see was the pale sky framed by trees. The pit was probably about 9 or 10 feet deep, and I couldn't help but wonder how long it took the people who dug it. I called out for my friend, and soon his face appeared over the edge. At first, he was laughing, clearly not realizing how bad my situation was. But when I described the injury, his smile vanished, replaced with panic. He guessed that it was some kind of illegal animal trap set by hunters. I assumed he'd be able to pull me out, but his first attempt to reach me failed. He then tried using a sturdy tree branch, which I managed to grip. However, when I tried to put weight on my leg, the pain was unbearable. It became clear I wasn't getting out of that hole without outside assistance. It was still early in the day, so I wasn't overly worried yet. I could hear my friend pacing frantically above me, so I called up to him and calmly told him to go find help. The ranger station was about an hour away, and he could get there and return before nightfall. After he left, I was alone with nothing but pain and discomfort to keep me company. The pain came in waves, accompanied by nausea that made it worse. I briefly considered making a splint, but when I tried to tighten it, the pain was so intense I nearly blacked out. I decided to leave it alone and focused on staying as still as possible. Time crawled by, and I tried to distract myself by humming songs and thinking about random things. Then I noticed the sky darkening, and the distant rumble of thunder reached my ears. At first, the light rain felt almost refreshing, but within minutes, it turned into a heavy downpour. I was fine until I realized the hole was filling with water. Panic set in as the water rose, submerging my boots. I struggled to push myself upward against the muddy walls, trying to stay above the waterline. For a while, it seemed like I might not make it, but after what felt like an eternity, the rain started to let up. The water stopped rising and settled around my shins. Unfortunately, it was only a brief break. The rain picked up again, even heavier this time. I tried to stay positive, thinking of happy memories and old jokes, but every passing minute felt like an hour. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard voices above me. Help had arrived. The rain had mostly stopped by then, and the water level had stayed just below my waist. They managed to lower ropes and carefully pull me out. The thought of drowning in that pit still haunts me to this day. The ride to the hospital was a blur. I ended up needing surgery, where they added a few screws and plates to my leg. The following 8 weeks on crutches felt endless, but I was just thankful to be alive. We never did get the chance to redo that camping trip, but I've taken my kids on a few outdoor adventures since then. As I think back on it now, I might give my old friend a call. It's been years since we've spoken, and maybe another camping trip is overdue. You can bet I'll be watching my step this time around. This is the story of my first and definitely last camping trip. I was 17 at the time, and my family, which included my mom, younger sister, and little brother, had planned a weekend camping getaway with my aunt, uncle, and 2 cousins. While my cousins and their parents were seasoned campers, this was the first real camping experience for my family. Surprisingly, the first day and evening went smoothly. I actually found myself enjoying it more than I expected. But things took a turn later that night, around 10 o'clock or so. My sister, cousins, and I were settling into our shared tent, lying on our sleeping bags, when we heard faint footsteps circling our tent. The sound immediately made us uneasy, and we all sat up. Whoever was walking around was dragging something, maybe a stick, along the side of the tent's fabric as they moved. At one point, my sister reached her hand out and felt what was clearly a leg pressed against the tent wall. It was definitely not our mom. She had a very recognizable breathing pattern, and our younger brother, who was only 6, couldn't have made those heavy, deliberate footsteps. My cousins initially shrugged it off, saying it was probably their dad. He had a habit of playing pranks on camping trips, especially after dark. But something felt off, and we decided to peek out through the small tent window flap. From our angle, we had a clear view of the campsite and the nearby road. To our shock, we spotted my aunt and uncle walking back from the restroom area. They were far from our tent and nowhere near us when the footsteps happened. A chill went through all of us as we realized the person outside wasn't a family member. It was a complete stranger, and the only thing separating us from them was a thin layer of tent fabric. As my aunt and uncle got closer, we called out to them, urging them to come over. The moment they arrived at our tent, the strange noises stopped. It felt like whoever was out there had disappeared into the night. After explaining what happened, my cousins and sister were still visibly shaken, but I was so exhausted that I could barely process the fear. The rest of the camping trip carried on without any more incidents, and I tried my best to enjoy it. But the worst part of the whole experience wasn't the fear, it was the disbelief. My aunt, uncle, and even my mom brushed it off, laughing and accusing us of letting our imaginations run wild. My cousins, sister, and I have always loved spooky stories, conspiracy theories, and eerie legends, so maybe that's why they thought we were exaggerating. But even now, it bothers me. Who was that person? What were they planning? And what might have happened if my aunt and uncle hadn't returned at that exact moment? One thing's for sure, I haven't gone camping since, and I doubt I ever will again. Back in 2017, during my senior year of high school, my boyfriend invited me to go camping with 2 of our close friends, Sarah, Mia, and Josh. I was never a big fan of camping, but I loved spending time with them. Graduation was right around the corner, and we'd all be heading in different directions soon. So, on a Saturday afternoon, we stopped by a convenience store to grab our favorite snacks and drove out to the outskirts of Willowbrook, where there were some quiet wooded areas perfect for camping. We set up our campsite about a short walk away from Sarah's car and laid out a picnic blanket to play cards as the sun started setting. When it got dark, Josh and I went into our tent while Sarah and Mia shared theirs. I fell asleep pretty quickly, exhausted from the day. That night, I had a bizarre dream. It felt like I was watching through a bird's eye view, like a camera drone flying over the treetops. I was moving swiftly through the woods and spotted a faint orange glow. It was our campfire. As I drew closer to it in the dream, I woke up suddenly, drenched in sweat and paralyzed with fear. I couldn't move at first, but I managed to nudge Josh awake. Before he could ask anything, I put my finger to my lips and whispered, I think something's outside." We sat in tense silence for what felt like forever. Then we heard it, the zipper of our tent being slowly pulled down. I couldn't bring myself to look, but I could hear this low, raspy breathing right outside. Out of nowhere, the sharp wail of a police siren shattered the silence, and whatever was out there bolted into the forest. Josh and I scrambled out of the tent and saw Sarah and Mia doing the same. We wasted no time getting into Sarah's car. Once we were safe inside, I asked Mia what she had seen. Her voice shook as she described it. A tall, hunched-over figure covered in black, with a thin, wiry body and legs that looked animalistic, almost like those of a horse or deer. Its head was the most unsettling part. It was vaguely human, but twisted and crowned with antlers. It turned out Mia had panicked and used a police siren app on her phone, hoping to scare off whatever was out there. Thankfully, it worked. To this day, I have no idea what we encountered in those woods near Willowbrook, but I'm grateful Mia acted fast. If anyone out there has an idea of what kind of creature that might have been, I'd love to hear your thoughts. This isn't my story, it was told to me by my geography teacher. We live in Fairbanks, Alaska, a state famous for its wild landscapes and outdoor activities. Many locals enjoy hiking, fishing, hunting, and camping. My teacher, Mr. K, once decided to go on a solo camping trip with his loyal dog, about a 3-hour drive into a remote forested area well known for hunting. Mr. K found a good spot and set up camp close to his truck. He spent the day playing with his dog, enjoying the peaceful surroundings, and doing typical camping activities. As the sun set and the temperature dropped, he decided to call it a night. Inside the tent, it was just him and his dog. Mr. K had brought both a knife and a firearm for protection. Around midnight, his dog started whining softly. Thinking the dog might need to relieve itself, Mr. K unzipped the tent. Without hesitation, his dog bolted into the darkness. This struck him as odd, but he left the tent flap open in case the dog wanted to return. Still lying in his sleeping bag, Mr. K stayed awake, a growing sense of unease settling in. Moments later, he began hearing faint footsteps approaching his tent. The sound was deliberate, slow, and heavy. He froze, gripping his weapon tightly, and stared at the open entrance. That's when he saw it, a humanoid figure standing there. It moved in an odd way, almost like a hunched-over primate, but it was thin, bony, and unsettlingly smooth in appearance. Mr. K couldn't see its face or any distinct features due to the darkness, only its silhouette. The figure crept closer to the tent and then stopped. It didn't attack or make a sound. Instead, it just sat there at the entrance, staring directly at Mr. K. For nearly 2 hours, the figure remained completely still, watching him. It didn't shuffle, twitch, or make any noise. Mr. K's mind raced as he wondered what happened to his dog. Perhaps this creature was the reason the dog had fled. Just as panic began to truly set in, he heard his dog barking aggressively from somewhere nearby. The creature reacted instantly, leaping backward with unnatural speed and disappearing into the forest before Mr. K could track where it had gone. His dog came bounding back to the tent, growling and alert. Without wasting a second, Mr. K grabbed his belongings, packed up as fast as he could, and drove away at first light. He later said he would never set foot in that area again, and honestly, I don't blame him. I can't say for certain who first suggested the idea, but by sunset, we had settled on a date and a destination. While I'd been camping plenty of times before, I was pretty sure neither Alex nor Ryan had ever gone. They had joined the family much later in life, after my biological father had already passed away. He had been the true outdoorsman. My stepdad, not so much. Don't get me wrong, he's a good guy, but nature just isn't his thing. We made a checklist of supplies and stuck to it religiously, including 4 cases of beer, arguably the most essential item. We packed up the truck and hit the road at dawn, completely unaware of how this trip would change everything between us. The 3-hour drive was quiet and uneventful. The dry surroundings gave me some relief. Fire starting was never my forte, and neither Alex nor Ryan had ever set anything ablaze beyond a cigarette. I'd brought lighter fluid just in case, though it turned out I didn't need it. While I worked on building the fire, Alex and Ryan set up the tent using knowledge they'd gained from watching tutorial videos online. I'd purposely picked the simplest tent available, yet it still took them nearly an hour to get it upright. By the time they joined me, the fire was blazing, potatoes were buried in the coals, and steaks were ready to sizzle. I was already halfway through my second beer. Dinner didn't take long to cook, and by nightfall, we were sitting around enjoying a hearty meal. After we ate, the real fun began. I'd chosen an isolated camping spot intentionally. I knew we'd get loud and rowdy once the drinks started flowing. More importantly, I loved building massive bonfires and cranking up my favorite music, 2 things you can't do with neighbors nearby. That night was an absolute blast. We powered through 2 cases of beer and didn't crash until the sun was starting to rise. Despite the pounding headache the next day, I knew this was something I wanted to do more often. When I finally dragged myself out of my sleeping bag, it was past noon. Alex and Ryan were already awake, sitting beside a cold fire with beers in hand. They greeted me with tired smiles. I asked about the fire, and Alex muttered something about failing to relight it. I laughed, grabbed some wood from the tree line, and returned to the fire pit. After a few moments of gentle blowing, the embers flared to life, and the fire roared again. Their wide-eyed expressions were priceless. While waiting for water to boil, I cooked a big skillet of eggs and potatoes, and we had breakfast with steaming cups of coffee. Once we ate, I felt a lot better and suggested we go fishing. We spent most of the afternoon by the creek, returning just before dark. Unfortunately, none of us caught anything worth keeping, though Alex had clearly caught a decent buzz. I cooked the last of the steaks, and we sat around finishing off the remaining beer. That evening was much calmer. I kept the fire small, knowing I'd have to fully extinguish it before we left. The 3 of us spent hours chatting about pointless topics, work, girls, life in general. By around 2 a.m., we decided to turn in. My last memory was Alex stumbling over himself trying to exit the tent for a bathroom break. He definitely had more to drink than either of us. When I woke up, faint sunlight was filtering through the trees. I desperately needed to relieve myself, so I fumbled with the tent zipper, trying not to wake Ryan. As I unzipped the flap, a sharp, acrid smell hit me. Something burnt, almost like charred meat. I assumed Alex was already up, attempting to cook breakfast. With a grin, I stepped out, ready to tease him about his cooking skills. But Alex wasn't by the fire. The fire itself was dead, and something large lay across the ashes. My stomach turned as I took a step closer. The smell intensified, and realization hit me like a brick wall. It was Alex. He was face down in the fire pit, unmoving. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed him and rolled him over. His face was blackened, the smell overpowering. I shouted for Ryan, but when he didn't answer, I ran back to the tent and shook him awake. Groggy at first, he sat up when I yelled, "It's Alex. He's dead." Ryan bolted out of the tent and froze at the sight of our brother's charred body. He dropped to his knees and let out a wail that cut through me. I backed away, tears streaming down my face, wishing I could be anywhere else. The cold morning air hit me, and I realized I'd wet myself. But none of it mattered. The horrible sight was seared into my brain. After what felt like hours, I finally called for help. The authorities arrived about 30 minutes later. They took Alex's body away, and the coroner spoke briefly with us. The smell lingered, thick and nauseating. An officer sat with me in the tent, asking about the events of the previous night. I answered the questions, but my mind was elsewhere. After they left, Ryan and I packed up the campsite in silence. There was nothing to say. Looking back, I know I came across as cold and detached. But as the oldest, it was my responsibility to break the news to our mother. She had always wanted a big family, and when she adopted Alex and Ryan as teenagers, she thought her dream had finally come true. Over the next few weeks, I noticed Ryan watching me differently. He never said anything outright, but suspicion was etched into his expression. The medical examiner's report only fueled the tension. Alex's body showed strange bruising, and his skull had a fracture. The coroner said these injuries could have been caused by heat or a fall, but Ryan wasn't convinced. I had my own doubts too. Alex and Ryan had argued a few times, and they'd always stop when I entered the room. But now wasn't the time for blame. Our mother needed us both, and I wasn't about to let this tear our family apart. Still, I can't shake the feeling that there's more to this story. Whether it's a truth I'm ready to face or not, I owe it to Alex to find out. He was my brother, and he deserves that much.